wasn't so long ago that trains were part of everyday life in America and the developed world.
Here, there's something for every taste. From Dad's favorite, the electric trains, to the latest design in space rockets. Still, even the comparatively old-fashioned train sets have innovations that keep them abreast of the times. For example, two trains on the same track, yet individually controlled.
And then things changed. We thought we had to say goodbye to childish things, but no one knows why. Of course, no one would call this a childish thing. Maybe a little explaining is in order.
I don't think the public understands the distinction between model railroading and toy trains, but I think they would enjoy both of them if they did understand that distinction. And I think the people who use one or the other as a hobby would also appreciate everybody understanding the distinction, and it would actually make their hobby more fun.
This is scale model railroading. It's pretty serious business. This is scale model railroading. And so is this. This too. This is not. Neither is this. Nor this. Scale. Not scale.
The advantage of three railers, particularly with younger children, is that they're virtually indestructible toys. And I say that knowing that I have several locomotives that have survived a 4-foot drop off the table and still run.
Notice the construction here, very solid metal. That's not plastic. So that's the way they used to build them. I remember my Lionel set. You see a lot of sparks and stuff. They had an electrical pickup for that middle rail. And my brother and I, we both had Lionel trains. What we used to do is, I'm ashamed to admit this, but we used to run the trains into each other, stage these elaborate train wrecks.
Model railroading isn't a toy per se. It's cute, I admit that, it's cute, can be cute. It's more that it is somebody's interpretation of life in miniature. Sometimes a good interpretation, sometimes not so good, sometimes abstract art, but it's somebody's interpretation, and it moves and it runs, and if it's done right, it can be a thing of beauty. There is a lot of misperception about model railroading out there, and bless their hearts, as they say in the South. Usually they say that when they're about to say something bad about somebody, but bless their hearts. That misperception is based upon a misunderstanding of what model railroading is. We look at model railroading, and the NMRA is primarily what we call a scale model railroading operation, which is what? Scale means the relationship between the real thing and a model. So if you have a 40-foot boxcar, and you have a scale of 1 inch to the foot, well, that boxcar is going to be so big. That's scale model railroading. Toy trains, or tin plate, or which most of the public thinks model railroading is, Lionel. Normally not scale. In other words, that 40-foot boxcar may be actually shorter or long, or actually shorter, because it's a toy and they're trying to fit it within a packaging unit, or they're trying to make it a certain way, and they don't really care that it's not absolutely to scale.
Okay, but there's room for everyone in this hobby.
Thank you.
Describing model railroading and the people who do it can be contentious. It's not hard to offend in a community with such loyalties and passions. But there is one thing all model railroaders can agree on. Model railroading is good for you.
I lose myself in this hobby. I mean, no matter what's going on in my life, this is very relaxing just to sit out there and work at the workbench.
For a lot of people, it's a stress relief. To some people, it would drive them nuts, but to a certain group of people, working with that train, working with your hands, it's something that kind of calms you down.
There are two things that are very important to me. One is the ability to calm down, chill out, and soothe my head by watching a train go around. I don't know why, some psychologists can explain that to me, All I know is if I have a train on the track that I like and it's running well and it goes around and around and around, I get calmer and calmer with each lap.
A long time ago, I had a psychiatrist come in here, and he explained to me how he himself had built a model railroad empire for his own use, but it was a way of him getting away from his day-to-day life.
I think of model railroading, I think a lot of people could hide. Here in the Northeast, it's in the basement. And I know a lot of wives that probably wish their husbands didn't spend quite so much time in their basement. So I don't know if they're hiding from their lives or hiding from the pressures of life. They just go downstairs and play with their trains. When I first roll into my train room and look around, and I think it's a feeling of calm until I notice a spider web or a piece of dust. And then I notice another one, and then another one, and then I realize how much work I have ahead of me. And I tape a little paintbrush on my hand, and I start dusting. And I never thought dusting could be so relaxing, but I would say that, it's my, it could be a substitute for an antidepressant medication.
The concentration that comes in working on a model, doing the research, adding small detail parts to something, is a little like yoga in its concentration. I mean, you cannot worry about the world outside when you're working with small tools and a magnifier trying to get something just right. And with every small detail, again, you're evoking something from that period. It is, in some ways, I think, a protest against the world as it is, because you say, I'm going to be God for a while. I'm going to create a happy ending. I'm going to create characters. It's a protest against the world as it is. I don't accept the world as it is. In some ways, with the model railroader, you're creating a world. For a little bit of time, there's power.
The whole concept of having a small empire that you're in complete control of, I think, appeals to some.
Just drives you crazy trying to keep the world in shape. Come on up there. Oh, that's better.
What isn't compelling about the idea of creating a world the way you want to see it? The way that you wish the world was, or the way it was at a time where you thought it was just particularly great?
To me, the act of creation that way is just great, and model railroading is the venue. It gives you something to aim for, rather than just, I'm going to build a dollhouse, I'm going to build a bicycle. Now I'm going to build a train, I'm going to build a town, I'm going to build a city, I'm going to build a layout. It's the creation part of it is what's so cool about it.
John Allen, who was a prolific modeler back in the early days of model railroading, he always had these little wins built into his scenes. A stegosaurus pulling a boxcar. Come on, who does that? What other hobby could do that and say, it's my world, so what?
I might go to, let's say I go to somebody's house and I look at their model railroad, and let's say it has a lot of toilet humor. It might have, say, a scene where there's a prostitute or things like that, and then you wonder what made him put that there, because this person that has a prostitute in a John modeled on his layout is, it might be your pastor at your church, and it kind of makes you wonder, like, is he trying to live a secret life there or something like that? But I have noticed that look at somebody's layout and he'll have a scene on there that I'm like, I wouldn't think of you planning a scene like that in your head, so that was just one of I did meet a priest that had maybe not a priest, a pastor. I don't know if there's a difference or not, but that had a dirty scene on his layout, and I was very surprised.
It's just a toy that we have fun with, and it gives me pleasure, and I get to create. I get to create stuff. Just like a painter would take a blank canvas, I take a car out of a box, it's unpainted, put it together the way I want it to put together, and I get to paint it the way I want it, and I get to weather it the way I want it. When I'm happy with it, then I put it back in a box again and store it till the next time I want to look at it. It seems kind of silly, but that's my deal.
A lot of us see and correctly, I'm sure, we see model railroading as an art form. And I think it really is. In other words, you know, if you do paint a backdrop, that's art. If you paint a locomotive or weather it to make it look old and used, that's art. If you put a building so that it looks right in a scene, that's art. If you arrange several buildings into a bigger scene, that's art. So when you start getting into art, you can offend sensibilities pretty quickly. And so I think the line is right there at some point, but I think if you got everybody in a mellow mood and discussed it, I think we could probably come to some kind of an understanding.
Okay, so why should we care about model railroading?
What model railroading, like any other creative pursuit, if the participant gets actively engaged in it, model railroading in the end is going to train your brain by requiring you to do lots of different things, to be multimodal. I honestly think that the combination of thinking about engineering, about fine motor control, about the kind of problem solving that operations involve, or even designing a layout and figuring out how you're going to fit stuff in, all that kind of flexibility that's required to do it, I think tends to keep people's brains pretty sharp. I think the worst thing for brains is sort of the degree to which we end up doing the same thing over and over again, the ways in which we end up becoming passive, not active. Obviously, you could do that as a model railroader, but if you're going to take it really seriously, you've got to be active and you've got to really be working in many different modes at once.
I retired about, 10 years ago, and I began kind of searching around for a hobby or something, and it was a natural progression to get back into model railroading.
The most important thing is to have a hobby. I see too many people whose entire lives are their jobs, and if your job's really rewarding, let's say maybe you're a trial lawyer or a doctor, and your life is important to a lot of people and all that, great. But most of the lawyers and doctors I know are retiring. And one of our kids' pediatrician, in fact, called me up and he says, okay, it was my turn to take care of the kids, now it's your time to come help me with the model railroad. And I think that's very smart of him because what are you going to do with your time? I mean, you don't want to idle. And there's too many people that just retire and literally die. And I think it's almost out of boredom. I don't know what the physiology is, but they just stagnate because they got nothing to do.
I think anything in which you have a passion not only can keep you young, it can keep you alive and keep you going. And I think model railroading has that potential. So does golf, so does... I had a very good friend who came down from the state of Oregon to a great organization in California. There was no commitment, but it was sort of okay, when the current executive director retires, you'll become executive director. Well, that didn't happen, and he was very disappointed, and all he could do was look forward to his retirement. He retired. He was going to write a book. He was going to lecture. He moved out to Rossmore Leisure World, and he was dead in 3 years. He didn't have anything to do. He didn't have anything to keep him going. So model railroading can keep you alive, but so can a lot of other things. You've got to have a passion.
When I retired from the state of California, where I worked for 40 years, there were a couple of people in my office who didn't retire, and they could have, and I'd asked them, why aren't you going to retire? And they said, I'm scared to retire because I don't have anything to do. And I thought, my God, that's tragic. And they were so lucky. They were so lucky for and happy for me, because they said, you're so lucky. You have something to do. You have a hobby. Oh my gosh! It isn't like I'm the only one with a hobby. But one thing that we're looking at is trying to reach out to people who are near retirement. The kids have grown up. They have maybe a little more income that they can keep now instead of paying for the kids' expenses. And they want to do something meaningful. Well, this is a meaningful hobby. It's a constructive hobby.
One of the things that I think distinguishes not just model railroaders, of course, but model railroaders among others is that they've never given up playing, that the play part of their life is maybe more important than the work part of their life, which I think is actually a healthy thing.
Everybody comes to the hobby with their own viewpoint, with their own motivation of why they play with trains or operate trains. I mean, you don't want to say they're playing with trains because that would be too childlike. So they say they operate the trains. But it's still definitely a form of play.
I think when people say we're not playing, I understand why they'd say that. They feel a little defensive because in common usage, play is a bad thing. It's something only kids do. I think those of us who have looked at it, whether through the fields of education or developmental psychology, probably have a different meaning of the word play. So when a model railroader says he's not playing, I respect that. What he's really saying is, I take this seriously. I'm doing some really serious, interesting things. I mean, I would argue that play is much more complicated, that Rembrandt and Da Vinci played. Einstein said play is the highest form of research. So in a sense, you can be really serious, working really hard, making really good stuff, and also be playing. And I think that's what model railroaders are doing.
There's a difference between playing with toys and scale model railroading for sure, or scale model airplanes or scale model boats. But there's real joy, and it's not profit-oriented, it's not work-oriented, it's leisure time-oriented. And I think the minute you say leisure time, in some way you're saying play.
I think you have to have a little bit of a kid inside you. I really do. And a little kid gets to play, and the adult gets to learn new stuff. And that's one of the things that's great about this hobby. And I don't think we should ever be afraid of being kids and playing. And that's a real good part of this hobby.
Not all model railroaders would agree, at least not openly, because model railroading is serious business.
There are a lot of little niches in this hobby. You'll find people who are attracted to full-size railroads in their current form. You'll find people who are attracted to full-size railroads in the past, modeling a certain period of the past, modeling the present. You'll find people whose specialty is scenery. You'll find people who are in love with freight cars, people who love passenger trains, people who love building track work, people who adore the electronics. And the electronics have come a long way in the hobby over the past couple of years. I would say my specific niche, if I had any, is probably freight cars. And my interest in full-size railroads, although I have some things that are present day, probably ended somewhere in the late 1950s, specifically for the Santa Fe Railway. So I don't do a lot of what they call rail fanning, which is going out along the tracks and taking photographs of current prototype locomotives. I'm not interested. That's not the period I model, so most of my modeling comes from research, books, old photographs, and things like that.
Model railroading is a niche hobby. That within that niche hobby, there's an infinite amount of niches. You can break down on ideas of scale, of era, whether you like passenger trains or freight trains, which particular railroad line you like the best, how much you're going to be concerned about getting the details absolutely right. The fidelity to prototype it's often described as your personal tolerance for how much whimsy you're going to have on your layout and in your models.
You have people who do scenery. You have people who love doing building. So you have artists, you have architects, you have people who love to play conductor.
There's a whole side of the hobby about operations. So instead of just running the trains around the layout, you start running them the way the railroad ran them, which means that there were rules that you had to comply with. There were train orders that were issued that governed the movement of trains. You had to wait while the conductor walked back from uncoupling the car before you could move the locomotive. So there's a whole set of aspect of the hobby, if you will, that's focused on operations. And there's some people who just love to do that, and that's all they ever want to do.
I enjoy operation. I'm one of these guys that goes to these, half-day or day-long operating sessions, and, with the cards and the routing and the dispatchers and all. I love that stuff.
There's a lot of people that'll build switching layouts, which are generally small shelf-type layouts that become puzzles, and you try to create what actually happens in the real world. You try to solve the problem of getting cars from one place to another in the least amount of time.
I like trains that are weathered, and that means trains, rolling stock and locomotives that look as if they've been through the elements. They have dust on them. They're not perfectly washed and gorgeous. They don't look like they come right out of the box. I like to add a certain level of detail.
Extreme weathering is cars that have been out there for years on the rails, rusted, beat up, faded, and then a lot of us have taken it to that level. You weather the cars to make it look exactly like the prototype.
There's a whole tribe, I like to call them tribes, of model railroaders that do subways and mass transit type things.
Most of the thing for me is making accurate models. Whether I get to actually run the trains or not, I do once in a while, a couple times a year.
I'm fascinated by the passenger train industry. And of course, that's why the coach yard specializes in nothing but passenger trains, famous passenger trains of the United States. That's my fascination. It was an era of travel that was very unique, very stylish, very elegant. You had the various first class versus tourist class, but yet the dining experience was fantastic, the lounge experience. It was just a great way of traveling. It was a much slower pace than how we travel today.
The comfort is increased. They're trying the Pullman appeal.
Many model railroaders remember the old days, even if they didn't actually experience them. History is such a big part of the hobby.
My grandfather, whom I never met because he died when I was 6 months old, but he worked on the railroad. So I grew up and have grown up with this image, this sort of lore.
Actually, it is got all Pullman fittings, but it was actually built in Canada.
There was an old Pullman car parked in that area where the tracks were, and I just would have all of these images of being in the Pullman car, riding the train, through the night somewhere to some distant place. A couple of times we met some people who I believe lived in the car at the time, and they took me and my brother through, and they showed us how everything worked. They pulled down the fold-out beds, and they showed where how the sinks all worked, and then they showed where you sat, and it was just, for a kid who was maybe 7, 8, or 9 years old, it was just fascinating.
I got into railroading, I think, because of my brother. My brother always loved trains. He was in the Navy, and this is in the late 50s. He came home on a 30-day leave, and he brought home a number of HO gauge brass locomotives that the Japanese had begun manufacturing. The Navy would shell Korea.
Spring is a bloody time in Korea.
And the battleships and the large cruisers would come back to port, and they literally would shove the brass gun shell casings over the side in the harbor. And the Japanese sent out their pearl divers, and they dove down and retrieved the brass gun shell casings and took them back and melted the brass down and made them into things that they could sell back to the sailors. Brass models of ships and brass models of trains. So my brother came home with a whole bunch of these beautiful brass models, which at the time were the latest and best that was available in HO scale railroading. And we decided to build a layout.
I have been a model railroader since I was a small child, starting with a wind-up train and then a first simple electric train, which I still have at home and is still operable. And then I went to finer and finer scales, finer level of details in my trains, and now am what I'd call a scale model railroader. I come by this honestly. My grandfather worked for 56 years for the Santa Fe Railway, and his father before him, and even I worked for the railroad in the 1960s out of Chicago, working my way through college. So I did a little railroading myself. And it's just always been a part of my life and my family's life, as I say, for a couple of generations. And so I guess there was no way for me to really escape from trains. Had I grown up somewhere else other than Chicago, the railroad capital of the nation, let's say had I grown up in Boston or Nantucket, I'd probably be modeling ships. But I model trains. I picked 1954. The railroads were all at their heights. There were many different railroads. There's something going by right now in the background, and that is music to my ears.
You've got to have that drive in you, that bug that keeps saying, a train, I hear whistle, I hear one, where is it? I got to go see it.
The Strasburg's coming in, the locomotive will cut off and move ahead to a switch and then back down the track and couple up on the other end of the train for the trip to Paradise. It's a 4.5-mile run. It's called the Railroad to Paradise, or you can call it the P and B for Paradise and back.
It goes to Paradise?
It goes if there's a little town in Pennsylvania called Paradise, Pennsylvania, and that's where it goes. Paradise, Pennsylvania is usually joined with 2 other towns, or sometimes 3 other towns to make a sexual joke. There's a town called Virginville, there's a town called Blue Ball, and there's a town called Intercourse. So if you do from Virginville to Blue Ball to Intercourse to Paradise, it makes a certain kind of warped sense.
Well, it's hard not to be interested when a steam engine goes by. I mean, those things are alive. They pant and they moan and they whistle and they chug and they chuff and they creak. And you just can't ignore a steam engine when it goes by. So, and I think Americans in general, because we're a product of history, that we weren't born here. Except for Native Americans, we all showed up from somewhere. And so we have a sense of where we were before, and we have a destiny, and that, you know, that's Europe, and that's Africa, and that's China, and that's Japan, and that's everywhere. That's the beauty of America.
For most people, trains tap into something deep.
I think if you scratch a lot of model railroaders, what you will find right under the surface is in many cases we're trying to recreate a special time and place in our own lives.
I was born and raised in the Kensington section of North Philadelphia, and I was within walking distance north of me of the main line of the Pennsylvania Railroad, which the passengers ran from Washington, D.C. to New York and all the western freight trains. And if I would go the other direction from my home, I was close, within walking distance of the Reading Railroad, which is a big coal hauler. They brought the anthracite coal from the coal fields in Pennsylvania down to the Delaware River, where they were loaded on steamers and went plied up and down the eastern seaboard, the Gulf Coast, and even South America.
I grew up in northern New Jersey in a town called Phillipsburg. Phillipsburg was a big railroad town. In its heydays, I think there was like 5 or 6 railroads that all converged into that town. It's actually right across the river, the Delaware River, from Pennsylvania. So we're really close to the border, and Bethlehem Steel was close by. And Phillipsburg was a big industrial town as well, so hence the railroads.
Well, Sacramento, of course, is the launch pad for the Transcontinental Railroad from the west to the east. But even before that, before the Central Pacific Railroad got started here, pretty much right where we're standing, the Sacramento Valley Railroad got its start here as well, just a few years before the Central Pacific started.
Railroading is what linked the country, the Golden Spike at Promontory Summit. That magic hasn't gone away. It is still pretty cool to see a mile-long train zipping along at 60 miles an hour. Less cool at 10 miles an hour over the road that you're trying to get across, but it's pretty neat.
Now, when I grew up, back in the late 50s and the early 60s, we didn't have the security we have today. So I used to get on my bicycle and I would ride down to the local yard, which is probably about 10 miles from my house. And you can just walk into the yard, watch the engineers switching the cars, go to the engine terminal, watch them on the turntable. Always fascinated with this.
I actually grew up along the lines of a main line for Conrail. That was the first step that brought me into Conrail. But it wasn't until much later, like around mid-90s, early 2000s, did it really take off. In fact, there was actually a funny story. When I was younger, my parents were restaurant owners, but behind the 2 blocks behind the restaurant is the main line, is the same main line from where my parents' apartment, you could see from my parents' apartment. So I was about maybe 5 or 6. I kind of snuck out. The weather was nice, it was warm, because I kind of snuck out and went down to a couple blocks just to plunk myself on the park bench just to wait for the trains to come by. Of course, when my dad found me, it wasn't the greatest thing in the world, but at least it was fun to be able to kind of run away for a little bit to be into my own little world.
All of us are born into a world of rules. It takes most of us a long time to learn how to live in the world of grown-up rules. That's what childhood is all about.
Washing up of the more conventional kind, a chore that comes round about once a week. Obviously, excellent training for future husbands.
Then one day, when we're grown up, the rules we follow are our own. For some, the rules are pretty intense.
Some people want every specific detail down to the last bolt and rivet. They are those purists are very often called rivet counters.
My primary focus is really a lot of the super detailing, the rivet counting.
I'm one of what the people call a prototype guy. I'm the guy that counts rivets. I know that a specific boxcar has a specific door with a certain amount of ribs, and certain amount of ribs separated by a rivet panel. I know this. Yeah, prototype modeler is what you call us dorks, and it's, I don't know, some people it bears with it a kind of respect to some, and an eye roll from others that we're worried about silly things that don't really matter. And if you put it in perspective, none of this stuff matters.
Over the years, I've become more and more, I suppose obsessive is the only word for it, in getting a finer level of detail. One of the things is I like taking photographs at close quarters of models. And so I like photorealism, if you will. I like getting in close with a camera. And so I think it's not true with every model railroader, but there's a certain group of us who really could use a little more Prozac in our diets because we are obsessive compulsive about a certain level of detail. That would be me on some days, not everything, but with some specific models, absolutely.
I would say every hobby gets a disproportionate share of obsessives who become obsessive about that hobby. And so we certainly have ours. But I don't believe that you have to be an obsessive to be good at it or to be interested in it.
One mecca for obsessive model railroaders and rail fans alike is the Tehachapi Loop. The Tehachapi Loop, connecting Southern California with the San Joaquin Valley, is a helix, or spiral, on the Union Pacific Line through Tehachapi Pass. The Southern Pacific Railroad built the loop in the 1870s to allow trains to climb and descend in less space than would be needed without the helix. The Tehachapi Loop is represented on layouts around the world.
It's a real unique section of rail that's out there, and we were able to put it in here in N scale. It's a pretty close representation of what the Tehachapi Loop looks like. And like I said, it's awfully cool to see a train snake over itself on that.
There may be no more famous depiction than that on the La Mesa Club layout in San Diego.
We find ourselves at the Tehachapi Pass area.
Cablevision by Elders.
With me, I have two distinguished guests. Here we have John Rosart, who is the Director Executive, or the Executive Director, however you want to look at it, of the Model Railroad Museum.
The famous San Diego Model Railroad Museum can trace its origins to the early 60s when a bunch of young guys who loved trains decided to start a club.
We had some issues on just growing up and not creating mayhem because the city of La Mesa had abandoned firehouse building in downtown Nebo Hall on Nebo Drive, and we requested the city to give the firehouse to us as a model railroad layout area. And so we were basically street legal to that extent by the late 1961.
Eventually, the La Mesa Club learned to play by the rules. With a half-century of history, they can do whatever they want. There are a million ways to be a model railroader today. You don't even have to declare your loyalties, though many do.
There are some people who, like the kid we all knew in school, who memorized every statistic of every baseball player out there. And there were some who only dealt with a single team. I'm interested in the Santa Fe Railway, and in a certain part of the Santa Fe Railway in 1954. So you might say, I'm only interested in those, to use the comparison, I'm only used to the home games the Chicago White Sox played in July of 1954. So that's how specific I've gotten. And that means I only have to have a certain focus, and I only have to have a certain amount of knowledge. I can't identify half the locomotives, most of the locomotives that are running out there on the tracks today in 2013. I don't know what they are, I don't care. I have some passing interest in it, but I'm interested in what ran in 1954, and that's the extent of my knowledge and all I need to know, and all that really interests me. So I've narrowed my focus and my knowledge in that respect too, which is great because my little brain has only enough room.
The funny thing about prototype modelers is that we're just like like football fans. If you're a prototype guy, you like your Burlington Northern, or I like my Burlington Northern. 1971 is what I do, and anything in 1972, I don't do it because it didn't happen with this stuff. It's too new. Anything before that, yeah, it could be. But the stuff after it, 1975 Burlington Northern, nah, it doesn't work with this. But it's like a football fan in that a Kansas City Chiefs fan is never on his worst possible day going to be wearing a Raiders shirt. Or he's never going to be wearing a Cleveland Browns shirt. He may wash his car with the Cleveland Browns shirt, but he's not going to wear it. And the same thing with train guys is they're loyal to their railroad. I probably wouldn't be wearing a New York Central shirt ever. Well, I would wear a Burlington Northern shirt. I might wear a Great Northern shirt. SP&S shirt, maybe.
I want my stuff to run and look very realistic, but I also want it to run in a realistic setting. So I've done my homework and I know what this railroad that I'm modeling looked like. I grew up in one of the towns that I'm modeling. I did not grow up in most of the towns that I'm modeling. So I went back to Indiana and Illinois, and I went to the libraries and I went to the historical societies and I knocked on doors and I met a lot of big German shepherds when people didn't want me there. It's all part of the fun.
Because I model a certain period in a certain area, I will try to evoke that area as much as possible with the vegetation, the color of the earth, what crops may be grown in the nearby fields, all that sort of thing. It's all part of the research and all part of the fun.
Photographer Steve Kreis is a well-known rail fan and researcher. Kreis is as committed to preserving railroading's past as he is to documenting its present. And he's sometimes surprised by what he finds in the images he scans for historical archives.
I recognized it as being from the 1989 celebration of Union Station, and I recognized it because I'm in the photo right there. This is also under consideration for our book, and fortunately we have the original negative also from that same collection.
Like Steve Kreis, Jack Burgess, a retired civil engineer for the city of Newark, California, is a committed researcher. But unlike Kreis, he works in 3 dimensions. Everything on his layout, even down to the paint and wiring, accurately represents the Yosemite Valley Railway as it was in August 1939.
25 years ago, I had a couple, a brother and a sister, visit me that lived upstairs in this building in 1939. Their father was a section foreman. There was no agent at the time. Normally, the agent would live up there. And they told me what was in here and so forth, and told me about the buildings along here. They also told me that they had a radio. They remembered having a radio. And I had thought about, when I was going to detail this building, putting the radio in there. But I thought, man, you're in the middle of this deep canyon. It's probably a 2,000-foot deep canyon, very steep walls. The road goes back and forth, climbing all the way down, even today, and then climbs up the other side. And so I didn't put it in there. But then later they told me that they did have it. And then many years later, I come across another photo, and this photo, which was taken about 1942, I got a print of the original negative, which was only about the size of an index card, scanned it, blew it up, but look real carefully. Here you can see their radio antenna. So they were absolutely correct. Now, if I was modeling 1942, I would also add these. These are service stars. And that would show that whoever was living here at that time had 2 boys serving in the armed services overseas during World War II.
I want my trains to sound realistic. I want them to run realistically. I want them to be a simulator of what really happened at some point in time. Some people define the time as August 1939. One of my friends has got it that narrowly defined. One of them is actually modeling a day that he has a lot of records for. Some people model a year. I'm modeling the fall of 1954. Others model, let's say, 1955. Others model the 1950s or the 1970s. You can be picky about that, or you can ignore it completely.
I model
what's typically Southern California into Phoenix, Arizona area. So you got the desert, and it's Union Pacific. It's a former Southern Pacific Railroad line, and now taken over by Union Pacific. And that's what I have, strictly modern, really modern. So whatever's new, I'm trying to get for my layout.
I've been, in the past like 20 or so years, I've narrowed my focus down to modeling the Burlington Northern Railroad in Western Oregon in 1971.
I'm working on Cajon Pass during World War II, which is kind of an unusual era for most model railroaders. Cajon Pass is the one of 3 gateways into the Los Angeles Basin in Southern California. It's located just northwest of San Bernardino, and 2 railroads come through the pass. Santa Fe and Union Pacific come through Burlington Northern Santa Fe today. Southern Pacific is nearby at Colton, and Pacific Electric ran through that area as well.
There's guys like Jack Burgess, who modeled the Yosemite Valley in September of 1939. And he doesn't add anything unless he can find a picture of it.
You might say, well, that is crazy and over the top. But one of the great things about narrowing into a specific period and specific railroad is you don't have to buy everything that's out there. So it really focuses your hobby and focuses your collection on things that are appropriate for your period and for your railroad. I run a branch line railroading, so this is